Welcome to Sailing Stories. I'm your host, Jerome Rand, here aboard the Old Mighty Sparrow. It is hot in the country today up here in Maine. We're getting it done, and I just finished up work. So I thought today we'd actually talk about the first experiences that I had aboard Mighty Sparrow, fresh out of the guy's yard that I bought it, and kind of the season leading up to me taking off on the big voyage. I'm hoping to do a big multi-part series about the entire trip around the world, but it's got to start somewhere, so it might as well start with the prep and me basically learning how to become a solo sailor and how to sail an old full keel kind of cruiser just like Old Mighty Sparrow is. So it was back in 2016, and it was right at the end of the year in December. I purchased the boat. It was in a guy's backyard for like 12 years after it had been wrecked in a hurricane. He got it all professionally redone and then fixed a bit of it himself. Boat was about 2/3 of the way complete by the time I got my hands on it. We took it to a boatyard, stepped the mast, almost got hit by a falling pin, which is about this big and weighs maybe 8 pounds. Luckily, it fell off the top of the crane, but missed me and the boat. That was about the only eventful thing that happened. And then, well, a lot of the wires didn't really match up. And obviously, there's always issues when you're first putting the boat together after it's been just sitting for so long. But I stayed in West Palm Beach in a little marina called Riviera City Marina, something like that. And the boat took about 2 months to get everything ready. I mean, it didn't have halyards. It didn't have all sorts of stuff. There were systems that weren't quite running. I needed to put some electronics on the boat, solar panel, install the wind vane. There was a pretty big list. But by the end of December, she was ready to go. And everybody was a little worried, myself included, about me striking off to do a 1,200-mile offshore sail by myself when I've never actually solo sailed before. And so my father, Jim Bob, who has done quite a bit of sailing himself, agreed to come on the boat with me, and we were destined to set off for the BVI. And our plan was to just do the offshore route, take off from Florida, you go north of the Bahamas, all the way east till you get to 65 degrees longitude, and then you turn south. And we did approximately that. We had some issues on that trip. The engine sucked water in through the exhaust, and so we didn't have use of the engine for the entire trip. And it ended up taking 14 days, but we made it down there. We had calms, we had a storm. It was pretty fantastic, and it was a great time for me and my old man to sort of bond like we never have before. I mean, 14 days on a small boat, you definitely get to know each other. So now I'm in the Caribbean, he flies home, and I've basically have to pretty much try and break whatever I can on the boat, get used to the boat, and then actually set off on my first solo sails. And essentially, that's all I was doing, was tinkering and trying to fix everything, and then I'd grab people and we'd cruise around the BVI. I had checked in for a month. And then after that month was over, it was time for the first solo sail. And I chose Dominica, which is about 275 miles to the southeast from the BVI. And I would be sort of outside of the island chain or away from it a little bit on this trip down. And that was going to keep me sort of out of the traffic. And I figured, that might be a safe way to do it. And so I took off, and it was about I want to say it took 3 days, maybe a little more, for me to get down there. And again, it was one of those things where I was trying to learn, how you sleep on a boat when nobody's on watch. On all the yacht deliveries I had ever done before, there's always somebody on watch. And now this is a whole new thing. But I went through some squalls, didn't have much traffic, and really kind of enjoyed myself. It wasn't too bad, and was able to pull into Dominica right as the sun was setting, throw the anchor down, clear customs, and then I was there for 2.5 weeks before I set off on the next trip, which was back to the BVI, and then a short month later after that. And always in between these trips, I'm sort of fixing and fine-tuning and trying to make it so that everything works a little bit better and see what doesn't work. And I was finding things like holes and leaks and cracks and systems that just didn't work all that well on this boat. And it takes time. And once you find it, you log it in the ship's log, and then you fix it once you're in a port. And so I went back to the BVI. And then the next trip, I went down to St. Lucia, went through some really heavy weather where actually a couple of other sailboats, I believe, sank that year in those little storms that we went through. Luckily, Sparrow made it through. We went to St. Lucia, got to visit a new island, all that sort of stuff, and was there for a bit. And then I cruised back to the BVI. Then I went back to Dominica. You get the picture. I'm doing these 3-4 day sails as sort of training, and they were building up to me taking off on more of a long distance cruise, because I at this point had figured out that I could solo sail the boat and I could do it for a couple of days, but I wanted to see just how my mind would react to being out at sea for like a month. And so in the very beginning of May, or late April of that year, I ended up taking off, and my idea was to head sort of northeast, hook into a low pressure system that was sort of headed east, go out into the Atlantic as far as I could, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then turn south and come back to the Caribbean before I headed north for the season. And I ended up being out for about 26 days of some of the best sailing I've ever been able to do. I had asymmetrical spinnaker. I didn't have a real destination in mind, so if the winds changed and I didn't want to go in a certain direction, I could always just follow with the winds. And it was nice. So 26 days, and then I returned to Dominica and got everything ready from there. Did a quick pit stop in the BVI just to see some friends and all that sort of stuff before I left. And then in June of that year, June of 2017, I headed north, and this was sort of more of the extreme passage, I suppose, to get the boat back to Maine, where I was going to haul out and prepare for the trip around the world. And the reason this was a more extreme adventure was just that I'd be going so far north. I had to also cross the Gulf Stream. You have to contend with George's Bank, lots of traffic, storms that come off of Cape Hatteras. All that was sort of thrown into the mix. And I really had to watch the weather, also watch the boat, keep an eye out for traffic. It was a pretty kind of intense little thing. And I remember after crossing the Gulf Stream and everything was pretty good, the weather turned on me as I approached Cape Cod and all that. And I ended up actually sailing into Gloucester. And part of the reason was the weather was pretty bad, but I had some pretty good experiences as far as seeing whales and dolphins and getting through the fog. And then I finally pulled into Gloucester, and after all this time, my old man decided he was going to fly out, hop on board, and do the last overnight up to Maine, to Rockland, where we are now. And it was nice. It was kind of cool for him to be able to see how much Sparrow had transformed, and also how much I had learned about, sailing the boat and using different sails. And we had just wicked great winds to get us all the way up there. We pulled in up here, got the boat hauled out pretty quickly, and then I started prepping pretty much for the voyage. So that was essentially what I ended up doing to be able to get into a confident zone where I felt like I could go and take this boat. I mean, I don't want to say that's all it takes is, 6 months of solo sailing and then you're ready to go around the world, because there was, previous to that, maybe 50,000 sea miles logged on other boats. So I'd done quite a bit, but it was, as far as the solo aspect, that's what it took me to feel confident that, okay, I made the right decision. I'm going to carry on with the goal of doing a solo nonstop. And that was what we did. So that's the story of how it all started, and hopefully this is going to lead into a whole series about the entire trip, and it'll be pretty cool. And I'm going to see if I can edit a few things in, not on this one, but on the following ones where I have a decent amount of video to cut in, so it's not just my filthy face that you see when I do these. But thanks for everybody who's supporting the podcast and the channel here on YouTube. It's been fantastic. The Patreon just keeps growing, and that helps me to purchase more stuff for the boat, which I definitely need help with because stuff ain't cheap. But other than that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.